Hey, folks, good evening, and thanks for joining me on Phantoms and Monsters Radio. I welcome all new listeners and members to the channel, as well as first timers in the chat. Now, this episode's going to contain a few more bizarre, unexplained, and somewhat creepy reports that I've dug up since the previous weirdest of the weird episode. Every so often, I set aside an exceptional account, which I'll present to the listeners. Again, please feel free to comment on the accounts and let me know your opinions. So, before we get started, I just want to mention this channel is made possible by you clicking on the subscribe and like buttons and by sharing our programming. If you're watching us on YouTube, super chat and super thanks donations are appreciated. You can click the dollar icon located below the chat box. Other donation links are also shown in the description. And thanks for your consideration. And your comments are always welcome. Tell me which accounts you found interesting in the presentation or suggestions for upcoming shows. I want to thank our chat moderators, Bernadette, Marla, Thomas, and Mike. Also, want to thank Kevin and Mary at ESP. Now, if you're in the chat and have a question, please use all caps, and I'll try to get to each one of them at the presentation. And when we are done, I'm going to talk about something we're going to try next week for next week's show. So stick around and I'll give you the information then. So, on his first account, on February 25th, 2019, I received a telephone call from an eyewitness, NV, who stated she had observed a winged being that early morning at around 5:30 a.m. near Darien, Wisconsin. Now, NV was traveling west on Creek Road on her way to work. As she approached the Turtle Creek Bridge, she observed a large winged being that she described as a flying witch. The being was at the treetop altitude and was gliding in her direction. It was early dawn, but enough light available for NV to make out a form. Now, the winged being suddenly descended towards NV's car and barely missed colliding with the roof. Now, NV described that the being's wingspan was much wider than her car and that the body was brownish colored like a paper bag. The body looked feminine and slight. The wings were bat shaped and very large. She never noticed the wings flapping. The speed in which it descended was not natural, and the face was unremarkable, almost blank. Envy noted that she swerved and almost hit the guardrail. Now, Envy did not notice where the winged being flew to after the encounter. Now, like many of these accounts in the Chicago area, in the Chicagoland area, Envy is also of Hispanic descent, and I've talked about this a lot, and stated that the being looked like a witch that was described to her as a child. She was quite upset and worried that she may encounter this being in the future. Now, a Babcock, Wisconsin teen girl encountered an angel winged gargoyle that was crouched on the roof outside of her bedroom window during December 2002. This is also another account that I've attributed to the winged humanoids in the Chicagoland area. Now, I talked to the witness, JB, who described her encounter with an angel winged gargoyle in Babcock, Wood County, Wisconsin during December 2002. Now, JB was in her mid teens at the time of the incident. It left an indelible impression on her in the 18 years since the encounter because of the uniqueness of the winged being and the peaceful feeling she had while watching it. She has told only a few people about the incident. Now, on that summer night in 2002, JB was lying on her bed watching television. As she adjusted herself, she caught movement from the outside of her window, which was on the same wall as her bed. The window was wide open to allow the cool, fresh air to enter her room. As she looked out the window, she focused on a winged being crouched down at the edge of the roof, not more than 10 feet from her window. JB felt no fear. She felt peaceful and not threatened by the presence of the entity. As she described it as a gargoyle like body and head with thin arms hanging down between its thin legs. The body was somewhat thin as well. The facial features were almost hidden by the wings that extended over and halfway around the crouching body. She was amazed at the large, perfectly feathered wings on the humanoid, which she referred to as angel wings. Now, the body was hairless and bald with pale gray coloring. The wings were also pale gray. Now, JB said that she believes that it would have been 5 and 5.5 foot tall if standing. She watched this winged being, for almost a half hour, during which it never moved or made a sound. It seemed to be focused on the yard below, even though she couldn't see its eyes. Now, JB attempted to get its attention, softly speaking to it, but the being never responded. The security lights below illuminated the being, so JB was able to get an excellent view of it. Now, after watching this winged humanoid for about a half an hour, she became very sleepy and decided to go to bed. She never felt threatened and left the window open. Now, in the morning, at about 6 a.m., JB was awakened by a loud radio frequency sound that came from outside her window. And when she looked out the window, the winged being was gone. She believes that the sound was so loud that others in the neighborhood could have easily heard it, but she never heard anybody else ever reference it. Now, her parents never heard anything, and JB had never heard anything like it since. Now, she's very lucid and precise in her description. It was obvious she had witnessed something quite remarkable. Now, look, that loud radio frequency like sound could have been that of a portal or a gateway opening or closing. I've heard it before. In the past, I and others had described a buzzing sound associated with portals opening and closing, very similar to a swarm of bees. I don't remember anything similar described by other winged humanoid witnesses. Now, JB mentioned that Babcock, Wisconsin has a history of strange phenomena, especially with UFO activity. Now, a UFO researcher was attending a conference when he overheard a conversation. Intrigued, he discreetly confronted the mother who revealed her true praying mantis insectoid form to him. So the witness states, "Hi, Lon. I thought I would share my tale. Years ago, my wife and I were at a conference, if I remember correctly, and talked to a well known UFO researcher named GW. He is also known as a physicist. JW told us the following story. He was attending a discussion of some kind concerning UFOs. It took place in a building where the rows of chairs were closely and tightly packed. He was in the audience listening to the presentation. He noticed a family of three sitting in front of him, a father, mother, and a child. During the lecture, the presenter was discussing possible UFO propulsion systems and was discussing how a UFO traveled in the atmosphere might use a ramjet design to assist during flight. The family's child leaned over to his mother and started to say, "But that's how our ship runs." The mother quickly shushed the child, but not before GW had heard what was said. Now, after the presentation concluded and everyone was leaving, GW managed to locate the woman by herself and discreetly asked her about what he had heard. She was friendly and verified that she and her family were not native to Earth. She was excited and started to ask questions. He was excited and started to ask questions, but she didn't want to go into detail, but did admit that her appearance was not what she actually looked like. He asked her to show him the truth. She described that she very slowly lowered her cloaking device to show him her real form. He described her as a praying mantis insectoid type alien. Only he saw it. No one else in the area did. He said that she was amused that he didn't react to her form. He had more questions, but she declined to answer, and they left. I don't think that story was published anywhere because he told it to us in person. Maybe you could locate him and ask for more detailed account. Keep up the great work. I never knew so much of this happen. I'm always looking behind me when walking in the woods now. Well, I did try to get a hold of this individual, and they never got back to me. So I don't know what the full story is on this, but it's quite interesting. So I figured I'd read it for you all tonight. Now, his next account, a horrifying reptilian humanoid encountered in the Great Smoky Mountains in western North Carolina, was recreated for Monsters and Mysteries, which aired in 2015. And the reason I'm talking about this was I had actually talked to this witness at one point. So, in the Appalachian Mountains in August of 1990, 17-year-old Jamie Anderson decided he needed an adventure. He began by sneaking away from his home. He states, "This was a trip that I decided to take on my own without anyone's permission. I was depressed and wanted to get away on a bus ride from Minnesota to Florida. I was about halfway down there when we reached North Carolina, and I had a change of heart, so I stopped there and decided to go back to Minnesota. But the next bus was not scheduled to depart for another 2 days. Now, being my age, I couldn't get a hotel or motel or anything like that. So I decided to go camping. So I made my way out into the Great Smoky Mountains area. I had a bullwhip, I had a machete. I was pretty much prepared for any type of wildlife that was out there except for what I encountered next. I wasn't prepared for that. It was around 1 or 1:30 in the morning, and I woke up from a god awful sound. My heart jumped up in my throat. The hair on my arms just stood straight up, and I immediately started looking around. My first thought was a cougar, so I grabbed the bullwhip and I started looking around for any signs of something stalking me. The noise was closer. That's when I saw shadows in the bush sort of moving. Then my eyes met whatever it was. Its eyes were a putrid yellow. I knew right there that I was dealing with a monster. The adrenaline just took all over knowing that this thing was looking at me, knowing that it was tracking me. I accidentally tripped, and when I hit the ground, that's when I heard the thumping behind me, like something was running. The fear of dying is something that I had never felt before, and I was determined to defend myself. What I was looking at was nothing that I'd ever seen before. It was humanoid, but it was very reptile like in appearance. It had ridges on its head. It walked forward, and I snapped my bullwhip again at it. The creature snatched it with its talon like hand and bit the end off of the bullwhip. I ran. probably ran faster than I ever run in my entire life. The only thing that I was going through my mind at the time was how much distance I could put me and this thing, whatever it was. So Jamie was so desperate he escaped to and dove into a cold mountain stream. Now he states, when I got to the other side of the river, I got out and I immediately started scanning the area looking around for it. I didn't know where it was. Hey, for all I knew, it could be in the water, so I decided to put some distance between me and the river. I must have been walking for 6 hours at least, and that's when I ran into a Cherokee Native man. I asked if I could get a ride back to the bus station. I looked pretty beat up, scrapes from tripping, and still shaking from the whole experience. The man then asked what happened. Something inside me told me to just tell him, and there was a very long pause. I thought, oh, he's going to kick me out of the car for sounding crazy. But he goes, you're lucky you only ran into one. Let's go. We just left at that. We didn't talk about it anymore. So, in this next account, a security guard in Nashville, Tennessee recalls her weird encounter with four bird people while on duty. Four foot tall, bird like humanoids that simply appeared before her. But then they later sing to her. Now, she tells me, I do security work at night, and it's in a big fenced in yard, kind of like in a rural area. Now, one night I was getting ready to go to the restroom, into the building. And for 1 minute, I was walking, and the next minute, I was in front of four, what I call the bird people, because they stood about 4 foot. Their faces were kind of humanoid like, but, between a human and a bird. Their body, it was, shaped like a bird, and it had that looked like a bird, but their face was different. Their faces were absolutely different. It wasn't exactly a bird face, but between a human and a bird, kind of flat, gray, and their eyes were kind of slit, and their nose was kind of, a bird nose, a beak, but it was in front of the face and kind of a small mouth. And it was just for a few seconds. Now, I'm not the kind of person that sees things, even though I know a lot of different phenomena. It's still fresh in my mind because it was different. And these were different beings. And I didn't have the sense that they were very intelligent. Oh, I did have the sense they were very intelligent. Sorry. And then the next thing I was heading towards was the restroom, and I was thinking it was interdimensional or an out of body type of thing. This was kind of like out in the open, and I'm thinking these things wanted to see me. They were standing apart. There were four of them, and they were just looking at me, and I was just looking at them. The next night, I was just sitting in my car patrolling like I always do, and I heard this beautiful melody. It was like a bird and a human. It was like they were singing to me. It was like they knew I had acknowledged them, and they had acknowledged me. It was like the most beautiful sound, an enchanting melody. It was just like they were singing to me. Now, a teen boy who visits his family in Gavate, Puerto Rico, had a horrifying encounter with what he calls a chupacabra. Now, he tells me, in 2003, I was visiting my family in Puerto Rico for summer. I was 13 years old at the time. I'm currently 26. I don't remember exactly what day it was, but it was shortly before the end of vacation. As I recall, it was around the end of June in 2003. I was spending the night at my cousin's house in Gavate, Puerto Rico, watching movies and playing board games. We had the front door wide open with the storm door shut on so the air could go through the house. At around 1:30 in the morning, my cousins, my sister, and I were getting tired. My eldest cousin, out of the two, turned to me and asked me to shut the front door. I obliged and headed to the door to shut it. The next minute of my life would change forever. I was a skeptic and didn't believe in anything paranormal or the occult until this point. As I went to close the door, I caught a whiff of something horrible. Out of one of the worst things I'd ever smelled in my life. It was at that point that I decided to look outside. The porch was about a foot off the ground. This creature was taller than me. Now, I was 4'9" at the time. It was at least 2 to 3 inches taller than me, and it was on all fours. Although it looked as if it could stand on its hind legs. The creature was grayish green in color with dark, thick hair covering most of its body. Now, as the hair got closer to the crown of its head, it got thicker and coarser. It was almost like porcupine quills and came to a messy point. Its front limbs were spindly, almost the same size as mine, but much longer with 3 fingers. Its hind legs were like those of a grown man and slightly toned. From what I could see in that 1 minute, its limbs seemed to have only 2 digits. Its head was bulbous, and apart from the thick hair on the crown, it only covered a very thin, lightly colored hairs. Its mouth was like that of a cross between a chimpanzee and a dog. Its lips were like a chimp, but the mouth came to a small point like a dog. I could see two rather large fangs protruding from its mouth, which was slightly agape. The most haunting thing about this creature's appearance, though, were the large oval shaped eyes. They were about the size of large oranges, but with an oval shape. They were an insane amber color and shone like nothing I'd ever seen, yet they seemed almost empty and dull at the same time. I could hear it breathing softly, but gurgling at the same time. I was frozen in place for what seemed like forever, but it couldn't have been longer, more than a minute, because I remember my cousin saying, "Well, that was fast." Once I snapped back to reality, I slammed the door shut and locked it. Now, at that moment, I ran off and I could hear it start to move outside on the gravel of the lawn. I then heard the bushes rustle. I went straight to my cousin and sister, panicked, telling them what I'd seen. None of them believed me the slightest. They would soon change their minds as shortly as they could have experienced like mine with different entities. As I stated before, up until I saw this creature, I was sure that nothing existed out there. In my mind, there were no cryptids or aliens or even ghosts or demons. These things didn't exist and were just BS to me. Then I had this encounter no longer than a minute, and my whole life changed. I was now a believer. I want to try to find others who have seen this creature or creatures that bear a striking resemblance. I want to know what was that I'd seen, and if anyone else had the encounter as closely as mine with the same entity, or at least one of its kind. I strongly believe that there are more than one of these in the world. As I previously stated, I don't know what it was, but I often refer to it as the famous El Chupacabras, only for the lack of a better creature to call it. I can't think of anything else that fits, or in my knowledge, that fits the creature. So whatever it was, I'll call it that for now. Now, of course, the chupacabra phenomena is well known throughout Puerto Rico. Um, Several other Latin American countries claim to have the same cryptid in their midst. Whatever this entity is, I believe that they may have been interdimensional, possibly alien aspect to it. Now, this next account, the witness states, I grew up in a bedroom community outside of New York City. It was the 1970s, and all the fathers in the neighborhood commuted to work while our mothers were stay at home moms. All the moms were busybodies and had their noses in everybody else's business. The talk in the neighborhood was about the family that lived beside us, the Smiths. Now, the Smiths were very strange. There was Mr. and Mrs. Smith, who looked like they were in their 40s, and their kids, and a son and a daughter. The kids were early teens, and we never knew their names. They didn't go to school, so we assumed they were homeschooled. The only time we saw them was when the whole family would walk a single file to the garage at the back of their house and drive away in their Rambler station wagon. My mom talked to Mrs. Smith once right after they moved in, but that was it. They never answered the door and there was no phone ring listing. Mr. Smith never drove to work, and Mrs. Smith was never seen shopping or doing chores. The yard work was taken care of by two men who would drive up in a gray service truck once a week during the spring and summer. They would cut the lawn and trim the hedges. There were no flowers or trees, no lawn furniture, nothing. Now, one of our neighbors called the mayor's office about the kids in school, but we never saw anyone ever come to the house. They never received mail. The postman told us that, and they were never any deliveries. Now, the Smiths lived there for about 4 years. We didn't even know they had left until another normal family moved in. They told us that the house had been on the market for several months and that it was purchased through a government auction, but that seems strange as well. And I also got another account, which I have talked about in the past, but I'm going to read that too. It's very similar to that one. Hi, Lon. What are your thoughts on possible alien habitation among the human population? Now, please keep an open mind when reading my email. I live in a moderate sized borough in Pennsylvania. I live in the same house I grew up. In fact, most of the neighborhood had remained the same for the past 20 years or so. This includes the family that lives across the street. This family, who I refer to as the odds, is not normal by any stretch of the imagination. There's a husband and wife who are in their 70s and their daughter Carol, who is now my age, 52. They have lived there for as long as I can remember. Carol and I went to school together, though we barely knew each other. She has always been very att- she had always been very attractive, though I never recall her ever having a boyfriend or a girlfriend. Her parents maintain a very nice house and seem to get along well together. Carol and her family are always a trio. They are never even separate. They are never seen separately. They do not go to church, are not involved in any civic activities, but this isn't the strange part. Every spring I can recall, they dig a large hole in the backyard. It's in the same location every year. The size is estimated to be about 10 to 15 feet and about 4 feet deep. As soon as the hole is dug, they cover it up with a huge tarp that is stacked, staked into the ground around the perimeter. It remains like that for 2 days when it's quickly filled in and topped with new turf. Every year, it's almost like the harbinger of spring. The odds are digging a hole. Now, they don't talk to anyone. Never. Carol never talks to anyone. I've only heard her voice on a few occasions, and that was when we were in class together and she was answering the teacher. Now, I attempted to talk to her a few months ago during the holidays, and she simply looked at me, smiled, and said nothing. I had never heard her parents say anything. That brings up another point. Carol doesn't look anything like her parents. She must be adopted, or I suspect something else is going on there. I remember when I saw the movie The Truman Show. That's the odds. Everything stays the same. One summer, I took a photograph of a family member on our front lawn, and in the background was the odds' front yard and house. A few years later, I was looking at the photograph and was amazed how similar house shrubbery and flowers were at present. It looks like the flowers came up the same way a few years later. They seem to follow routine for each day of the week, but the one thing that they do every morning is strange. The three of them tour outside the house. There are specific places on the perimeter of the house where they stop, hold hands in a circle, and look into the sky. It's very strange because each time they perform this ritual, I get a static feeling in my hands and feet. It affects my mother the same way, even when we're not or watching them or somewhere else. There are other oddities as well. None of them has a job. No one ever visits, and they got a lot of deliveries. It seems like something comes every day. I'm convinced that these people are not entirely human. I know it sounds nutty, but I'm not the only person in town that thinks that something nefarious is going on with the odds. Now, this next account, the death of a friend in a severe auto accident results in a series of unexplained events. Did the death occur or not? Now, the witness states a few years ago, a good friend of ours was in a severe car accident in which the passenger was in critical condition, whom I didn't know, and the driver, who was our friend, was also in critical but worse condition. Within the first 12 hours, our friend, whom I'll refer to as Mary from here on out, died at the hospital. I am unsure of the fate of the passenger, as I didn't know them, but I believe that they did survive. Now, originally, the news of her death was brought up to me by another friend and later confirmed it when I looked it up and saw it on the news webpage stating her full name and full first and last name, which I might add is not a common last name at all, but didn't feel comfortable disclosing here. Circumstances of the accident, the location of the accident. Now, after a couple of days of checking for an obituary to get funeral details, I eventually saw it around day 2 or 3, but unfortunately, it said the family wished to have a private funeral open only to relatives. Death wasn't a new thing to me, as I unfortunately have already had a few friends pass by this point in time. But it was unsettling not being able to say my final goodbyes at a funeral, as it usually is the norm. Fast forward about 3 to 4 months or so, I'm going about my daily routine and coming up to a four-way stop sign at nearly the same time as another car. The other car pulled up to the stop sign at the road perpendicular to my right. I remember this so vividly, I'll never forget it. Knowing a car was there, I probably glanced at my phone for a second and let them go ahead. And some loud screaming caught my ear over the sound of the radio. I blow it off for a second, but it continues to increase in frequency. I look over quick, look forward again, and then it crosses my mind. No way in hell. And I look back over, and it was Mary leaning out her window of that other car, waving her arms all around, screaming her name, trying to get my attention. The weirdest chill feeling came over my body, literally as if I'm seeing a ghost, and I'm questioning my sanity of whether I was seeing things. Now, at this point, I yelled out the window to her to tell her to turn right and pull over at the first street, which was within eyesight. I get out of the car and I'm stuttering and I don't have the first clue to what to say. And she just decides at that point to lean in and hug me. She was solid. I could feel her hugging me. So at that point, I was assured it wasn't a ghost. I explained to her how I grieved over her death and how I saw her obituary and everything. And she thought I was half crazy. I wish I could explain the way it feels to see somebody you knew was dead for a few months and then able to hug them and have the chat in the most unexpected way possible. But I don't even know if there is a word in English language to describe it. Now, where it gets interesting is after sharing all the details I knew of her passing in an accident, everything matched up minus the death part. But I vividly remember seeing the obituary and the news article about her and all the details of the accident. She did get into a terrible accident and was just released from the hospital couple of weeks before I saw her after she spent a couple of months in the hospital. The exact road and the location I told her about were correct spots as well. The first 30 days she was in the hospital, she was in a coma and had a rough recovery and had many surgeries following that, so it wasn't minor by any means. Later that day, I tried finding the obituary and news article, but they were nowhere to be found. But where did I get all the info from? This has been weird for a while, but for the longest time, I blew it off as someone with the same name in a similar location, but I can't find anything on that either. The likelihood of someone with the exact unusual name is highly unlikely as well. Not sure if this is a glitch or if I shifted timelines. So that's the last account, folks. If you have questions, please put them up. Now, while we're waiting for that, I am going to explain next week. I'm going to try something different for the show. What I'm going to do, I'm going to describe a subject, a paranormal subject. something to do with the supernatural. And then I'm going to read a bit about it or talk a bit about it. Then I want you to discuss it in the chat. And as you discuss it, I'll be reading out your discussions, your comments, even if you have questions. But these subjects are going to be controversial subjects. Now we're going to do one for each week when we do this, and I'll probably do it wha- every month or so, or maybe it depends how you respond to it, and if you want me to continue doing it. But we will do this next Friday, so we'll see if see if it turns out to be an interesting endeavor. Maybe we'll all learn something. So I'll leave it at that, and then and we'll talk about it next Friday. Now, I'm looking up here, and dagnabbit, there's a strange cryptid out there about 4 foot tall, looks like the Mothman, except it has no wings. Any thought? Well, I mean, I don't know if you have any more details on it. I'd probably give you my opinion. It has no wings. In the Chicago sightings, we had a couple of sightings of humanoids that had body style very similar to what the winged humanoids looked like. And people did mention those to us, and we did make a record of it. In fact, I did actually post some of those. So I don't know. It very well could be. Maybe it's but we did have had a lot of humanoid sightings around these winged humanoid sightings as well. So another question. Jose Sanchez, have you heard of the bird people before? Any sightings, or is this more of a myth than anything else? Um, Occasionally I get one. They're not they're not unknown, but there have been some interesting accounts over the years. But maybe I'll dig a whole bunch of them up. It's nothing I don't get. I mean, I don't get a lot of them, but I have read other accounts from other people and other witnesses as well. Nancy Malcolm, Lon, do you think many old beings from history are coming back? Oh, I think they've been around. I just don't think people have mentioned a lot of them. Maybe they're showing themselves more so. I don't know. I don't think they come and go as much as maybe some people will believe. Um, but you know, maybe if it's something that has was known many years ago and then coming back in another form, or just something people forgot about. It's hard to tell. Dagnabbit, have you ever heard of some type of a large blob thing that has thousands of vibrating bristles around it, like a buzzing sound? It crawls and moves towards you if you hear their voice. If it hears your voice. Haven't heard of that one. I'm not saying I definitely haven't heard of it, but I don't recall. I'm kind of interested where you saw it at. Maybe you can send me something. Davy Jones Locker, haven't seen you in here in a while. What's your thoughts on the family that dug the hole every year? I don't know what that was all about. It's always a favorite account. That count probably was sent to me about a dozen years ago. And the one odd thing about it is that the witness refused to give me the location, the town in Pennsylvania, but I know it was in Pennsylvania. They seemed very forthright, but they just did not want me to know where it was. So maybe the odds are still around. I don't know. Marla asked, "Do you get many bird reports?" I No, I don't. I don't get many at all, other than maybe the winged humanoids, of course. But as far as something looking like a bird, no, I don't get a lot of those. Now we get pterosaurs and other winged beings and flying beings, but as far as a bird humanoid that has the characteristics of a bird, we don't get many of those at all. Ryan, thank you for your donation. Very much appreciated. Anything else, folks? Okay. Well, again, next week we're going to try something different. I hope it's something that's enjoyable. The subject is a little bit different. Kevin and I talked about it last week, but I decided to go ahead and try it out and see what happens. It's a subject I have written about in the past, but it seems that more and more, and I see more questions are coming up, so I will answer those. I mean, Jose Sanchez states, "Do you uh, think that Mothman and Dogman are aware of each other's existence?" Oh, I think a lot of these cryptids know that others are around. In fact, I believe in some instances they may actually come from the same existence. Um, there have been accounts where some of these beings have run into each other in certain respects. So I think they do know that there are others that aren't of this earth, possibly that they know about. Amy Crew, are people on your team still communicating with the winged humanoid things? Nope. We have not heard from them in almost 3 years. It was unfortunate, and you're talking about the unseen ones, which is what these winged humanoid creatures call in the Chicagoland area had called themselves. But there was an instance where somebody outside the team tried to communicate with them, and it led to someone getting hurt. And I can't really go into it, but it was they just cut off all contact with us. But we did have some communication, but unfortunately, that has not restarted again. Hopefully, one day it will. Maybe we'll figure a way of be able to get in contact with them. But at this point, we really just don't know anymore. Macho, do you ever get many reports of shadow people or shadow entities in New Jersey? Because my wife and myself have experienced them. The shadow people, we get those all over the world. I mean, it's not just, but I knew in New Jersey, if you've had the encounter, I have had a few in New Jersey. It just depends on the situation. Mortal Clown, thank you very much for your donation. Much appreciated. Jose Sanchez said, interesting. They may also be coming in and out of portals, time dimensions. Yeah, I believe that. I believe they are. And, and I think you're talking about the unseen ones. I think from just the evidence we had gotten at the time and the type of communication, they did seem to us to be moving in and out of portals or some type of gateway. But they were making contact. I mean, it was tangible contact. Okay. Well, again, next week, join me and should be interesting. I want to thank each and all you for watching and chatting. And if you did donate, it's truly appreciated. Your support is what makes all this possible. So please like, subscribe, and share. And if you have a sighting or encounter report that you'd like to be considered for the show or for the Fams and Monsters blog, please email me at lawnstrickler at phantomsandmonsters.com. So until we meet again, stay healthy and safe. Have a great weekend and good night.